Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be going over 8 more fun and strong builds. These are really enjoyable. A couple of these are requested builds too. People were looking for these specific builds. I can't wait to jump into this one. We're going to start with the Holy Bonk build. So this is going to use the Great Stars with Sacred Blade, as well as the Envoy's Longhorn, and this is going to concentrate on jump attacks, and then if you need to, you could switch to either Ash of War for massive holy damage. By the way, if you want to experiment with different builds, if you want to start build crafting on your own, I have a build crafting series on my channel you should check out, but one weapon I recommend trying out if you're going to add jump attacks to your build is the Great Stars. There is so many different things you could do with this weapon. So the concept here is simple. You're going to use Sacred Blade when you get the chance. I end up missing there. You're going to add the buff, though, for extra holy damage. Do some jump attacks, and then this boss is a little too quick for it, but if you're facing a larger boss, you could switch to the Envoy's Longhorn and do massive bubble and holy damage. And we did a lot of jump attack damage there. This is a really solid build. By the way, this goes without saying there's going to be spoilers for DLC bosses. This isn't the most exciting one, but there will be spoilers throughout this video. I guess I have to mention that from now on. We are going to use the Sacred Great Stars with Sacred Blade, the Envoy's Longhorn. We have the Erdtree Seal. We have part of the Rakshasa set. I'm part of the Greybird set for the extra jump attack damage. Claw Talisman, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Holy Tier, Green Burst Crystal Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. Yeah, I saw in my last 2 videos, people were complaining about DLC bosses, but the game, it's been out 3 months now, the DLC. I'm pretty sure we're way past the grace period, but I guess I'll give some spoiler warnings from now on. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 30 Endurance, 23 Strength, 15 Dexterity, 60 Faith. We're using Golden Vow and Halishberry. The next one up here is a Dexterity and Frost build. A lot of people asked me for one of these, so I decided to do a really good one with the Great Katana, and we're going to be using it in Cold Affinity with Impaling Thrust for a lot of damage and a good amount of posture damage too. Impaling Thrust is truly good. It really is one of those Ash of War that's going to be reliable for most journeys. Even if you're on New Game Plus 7, it's actually one of the few ways that you could posture break bosses. And the fact that we have this in Cold Affinity, we're getting decent AR, we're building up Frost in the meantime, turns this into a powerful build. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. This is on New Game Plus, but as far as Radahn goes, I've mentioned this in previous videos. I continue to fight him and try different builds on him to see what works, and pretty much like everything does now. He was nerfed a lot. I'm not a fan of the nerfs across the board, and I feel like he's a bit too easy now. Yeah, lately he's become something I just like test different builds on and whatnot, and I am really surprised. I know on New Game Plus 7 he's still going to give a lot of players a hard time, but ultimately the damage reduction was significant, and you could survive a lot of his attacks. Even the Meteor attack in Phase 2, you could actually tank with 60 Vigor. Yeah, with Impaling Thrust on the Great Katana in Cold Affinity, ended up taking 3 tries in total. In one of those tries, I got hit with the Meteor on New Game Plus. I had a little bit of HP left. That surprised me. Clearly, that's probably part of the damage reduction because I wouldn't have thought I would have survived that. And back to the build, the whole point here is to use Impaling Thrust as much as you can. Build up that posture damage and try to build up Frost a little bit too. If you have time in between, you could do regular light attacks to continue to build up Frost, but Radahn doesn't give you too much time in between his combos. And as far as Impaling Thrust goes, this is a really reliable build for him. If you're having trouble with him on New Game or New Game Plus, all the way up to about Journey 4 or 5 when posture is a little bit easier, I recommend trying out this build for sure. On later journeys, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but it's still a solid build for him. When I mentioned you won't have much time between his combos, my recommendation is just to use 1 Impaling Thrust. If you go for an additional attack after that, you end up being too greedy and then you will get hit. You do not want to get clipped into one of his combos because then you could get clipped multiple times. Especially the way the holy damage attack works. Once you get hit by one, if you're not like consistent in like getting on it and rolling at the right time and then finishing the combo, you're going to get hit with pretty much everything. You want to try to avoid that. By the way, that was an awesome time to break him. He went up for his Meteor and he ended up getting a critical break. I'd say we brought Radahn back to Earth, but the truth is we didn't bring Radahn back to Earth. From Software did when they nerfed him like crazy. I mean, that's an awesome build, and it worked out really well. I'm not sure why I'm crouching here, but anyways, overall, he's significantly easier than he used to be. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know for this build. And what do we have here? We have the Cold Great Katana plus 25 with Impaling Thrust. We have any seal for buffs. We're using the Rakshasa set for the extra damage. Shard of Alexander. We have the Magic Scorpion Charm. We have the Blade of Mercy. We have the Dagger Talisman. And then we have the Magic Tier and Faith Tier too. All right, let's jump into stats for this Dexterity Frost build. Hopefully this helps you build a awesome Dexterity and Frost build. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 30 Endurance, 15 Strength, 60 Dexterity, 20 Intelligence, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. In the buffs, we're using our Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessing Spoon for a well-rounded and powerful Dexterity Frost build. And next up on this list, we have a Wild Bleed build. This is with the Lizard's Greatsword. This is going to be a really fun one. This combines Wild Strikes with the awesome charge attacks that have that extra projectile with the Lizard's Greatsword. So this one allows you to do two different things. It allows you to do charge attacks for some awesome bleed buildup and a good amount of physical damage too, and then switch to Wild Strikes when you need to for successive attack damage, and of course to take advantage of the fact that Wild Strikes is a very good Ash of War. Speaking of which, if I haven't done a build for it, be sure to comment what your favorite regular Ash of War is. What is your favorite regular Ash of War? Non-somber Ash of War, non-unique Ash of War, any weapon Ash of War? Be sure to comment below and let me know. I'm curious as to what your favorite is. Yeah, some people mix those up. Keep in mind, I'm talking about regular ones like Wild Strikes here, which you could put on a ton of different weapons, not unique ones. We have the Blood Lizard's Greatsword with Wild Strikes. We have the Dragon Communion Seal. We're using the Silver Tear Mask and the Rakshasa set. Maleficent's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Spike Crack tier, the Thorny tier, and of course you could always use Moog Shackle to stun the boss. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 26 Endurance, 13 Strength, 45 Dexterity. We have 48 Arcane with Silver Tier Mask. Sorry, I almost said 45. We have 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And then we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. You could use the White Mask probably for more damage, but I wanted the extra Arcane here. All right, next up here, we have the Milady charge build. A couple of patches ago, they changed the charge attacks to make them quicker on these two swipes, and honestly, they're pretty good now. You could build up on successive hits as well with the charge attacks and get a lot of damage. People keep asking for Dexterity and Frost build, so here's another Dex Frost build for you. You could use the charge attacks to build up a lot of damage. You could build up Frost quickly too, successive attack power, and then of course get some poise damage too. Another really good one on this list that I like a lot, ultimately, because Milady is just so cool. The moveset's great, the charge attack, the light attack moveset. Pretty much the entire moveset for Milady is phenomenal. If you haven't tried out the light greatsword moveset yet, be sure to try it out. Let's jump into equipment. We have Milady in Cold with Chilling Mist. We have Any Seal for buffs. We have the Divine Beast head and Rakshasa set on. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Axe Talisman, and then we are going to have for our tier, the Faith tier and the Spike Crack tier. All right, let's jump into stats for this build. We have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 27 Endurance, 19 Strength. Keep in mind, we have a little bit of extra stats with the Divine Beast head, 69 Dexterity, 25 Intelligence, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and then we have Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength as our buffs. All right, next one up here is probably one of my two favorites on this list, the top of the first build on this list, and this is the Black Flame Knight build. This is a really cool one that's going to use one of the Knight's Great Swords with the Black Flame incantations. Now, you could add Black Flame Blade to this build and then go for something like a Strength build, Heavy Affinity Weapon or whatever, and then go Strength and Faith and have a decent build. But the problem with Black Flame Blade is it's too short. So ultimately, I didn't choose that for my Ash of War, although my incantations are all Black Flame based. Not sure why it's comically short, but in most situations, especially against these DLC bosses, you're not going to be able to reapply it that much. So ultimately, I went for the incantations, and then I'm going to go for a weapon here in which we use Flame Spear. By the way, I'm not using it here, but if you have the Iron Greatsword, that's a weapon with amazingly high AR in Flame Art. It gets a C, but its base damage on pretty much everything is absurd. So if you have the Iron Greatsword, that would absolutely be an upgrade here. All right, so the concept here is going to be use your weapon with Flame Spear, of course, which is going to coat it in fire, give you a lot of AR and a decent amount of range with Flame Spear, and then you're going to use Black Flame, the Fireball, and Scouring Black Flame as your main incantations. And you're going to end up with a lot of damage in a well-rounded build, and you're not going to have to worry about constantly reapplying that Black Flame Blade, because if you're using that, you're going to be reapplying it every 10 seconds, which is pretty crazy. Mixing in incantations with that could be relatively difficult. And Black Flame Fireball is really an underrated incantation. I mean, I know a lot of people do use it, but it's one of those things where if you have high faith and you use it as a secondary, or if you're building around fire to begin with, you should pretty much always have it on hand because it's incredibly helpful and does a lot of percentage damage. And if you noticed, I have it in my left hand, the Godslayer Seal. The Erdtree Seal is probably going to beat out the Godslayer Seal's boost with High Faith, but ultimately you could use whatever you want because they're pretty close. I tested them both in your offhand when you're using a weapon in the main hand. When you're using both, I recommend the Erdtree Seal and then the Godslayer Seal in the offhand. All right, in a second here, we're going to jump into equipment stats, everything you need to know for probably one of the most awesome builds on this list, and the one that made the thumbnail cover. Let's go into equipment here in a second, everything you need to know to build a Black Flame Knight. And we have the Erdtree Seal plus 10, we have the Knight's Greatsword in Flame Art with Flame Spear, we have the Godslayer Seal, we have the Solitude set and Winged Serpent Helm on, Arsenal Charms plus 1 or Great Jar's Arsenal, Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Flame Tier, and Faith Tier 2. All right, let's jump into stats for this one. We have 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 36 Endurance, 16 Strength. We have 15 Dexterity. We're going to have 70 Faith with the Faith tier, and then we're going to be using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and for your incantations, you're going to use Black Flame and Scouring Black Flame too. And next one up on this list is the Dragon Hunter build. This is going to use the Dragon Hunter's Katana, of course, get a lot of damage out of that, but we're also going to be using the Repeating Crossbow as well as our ranged option. And you could use Flaming Bolts for some good damage. We got 3,600 damage there. When you're far away, you're going to be using the Repeating Crossbow. And then when you get up close, you could take down dragons using the Dragon Hunter's Katana, which has a chargeable and powerful Ash of War. Yeah, it's amazing against dragons. You can see 6,000 damage there. Do not forget to charge it. This is definitely one of those ones you're going to want to charge for the most damage you can get out of Dragon Wound Slash. And when you're taking on dragons, you could take them down fast with the Ash of War. Yeah, this is definitely a powerful Ash of War against dragons. I ended up taking rot damage here. Probably shouldn't have. I thought I was far enough away, but I kind of got caught in the corner there. I ended up catching myself in the corner, but it's all right. We're going to be able to take this dragon down relatively fast because we do extra damage against dragons with this weapon. So I covered this weapon when the DLC launched, and I wanted to revisit it again one more time, make a better build for it, and add something to it. Ultimately, I liked it a lot, and I like having the ranged ability of having the Repeating Crossbow, making use of it, because it's a good secondary weapon. Let's jump into equipment and stats for this build. And of course, we're going to end up having the Dragon Hunter's Katana. This is a cool looking build. And we have the Repeating Crossbow as well. We're going to have the Flaming Bolts as our choice of bolts, which does a good amount of fire damage. Any seal for buffs, we have the Rakshasa set on. We have the Shard of Alexander. We're going to have the Godfrey Icon because it is chargeable. Ritual Swords Talisman for both at full HP. Arrow Sting Talisman. Green Burst Crystal tier. Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. All right, and now we're going to be going into our stats. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 27 Endurance, 30 Strength. We have 60 Dexterity. That's 45 Strength when you two-hand this with the 1.5 times bonus, by the way. We will have 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And I think I hit over 51 Poise. That's the first Poise threshold you want to hit for PvE and PvP for most of these builds. We're using Golden Bow and Flame Grant Me Strength. And next up on this list, we have the Guts Cold Build 2.0. This is going to focus on Lion's Call and Cold Affinity, but with the boost from Frasia's Greatsword, this is one of those builds that could pretty much carry you through the game. Check this one out if you're struggling with Elden Ring at all. Yeah, Lion's Claw is incredibly dependable. I recently had a couple of people ask me what was better, Lion's Claw, Royal Knight's Resolve, or in some cases, Roars for charge attacks. Ultimately, I'm always going to go back to Lion's Claw. It also needs the least amount of buffs of any of those. Roars are also a little bit too slow for the DLC bosses, in my opinion. Royal Knight's Resolve is best when it's buffed like crazy. Let's jump into equipment here. We have the Cold Guts Greatsword, plus 25 with Lion's Claw. We have Frasia's Greatsword for the passive, any seal for buffs, Grave Burst set, and Rakshasa set. Arsenal Charms plus 1, or Great Jar's Arsenal if you have it. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman. We have the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, and then we have the Green Burst Crystal tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. And we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 40 Endurance. A lot of Endurance for this build. We have 60 Strength. That's going to be 90 when you two-hand Guts Greatsword. You could still get the passive two-handed, by the way, as long as Frasia's Greatsword is slotted in the other hand. 15 Dexterity, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We have 51 Poise, of course, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. And this is the least powerful one on this list because these aren't really ranked in any way, although this is probably a fun one. This is the Rot and Throw build. A couple people asked me to build for the Smith Script Spear. It's really kind of hard to build around the throwing weapons. I still feel like they're a little bit underwhelming, but we can throw bleed, and in this case, we're using the Poison Flower Blooms twice for some rot damage too. And yeah, you're not going to get a ton of damage out of the throws. A lot of the throwing weapons just don't give you a ridiculous amount of damage on the throws, but since we're in Blood Affinity, we have a bleed build here. You can get some bleed from a distance. A little hard on this dragon because he's fairly resistant, but overall, it makes the build work between Rot and Bleed. I know, I try to mix the throwing weapons in, but honestly, they still need to be buffed in my opinion. They can make it better. The Smith's Rip Dagger is really bad in my opinion. Scattershot throw aside, it really is an underwhelming weapon, but for this we have the Blood Smith's Grip Spear with Poison Flower Blooms twice. We have the Dragon Communion Seal Rakshasa set. Then we're going to have the Shard of Alexander. We have the Smithing Talisman, which doesn't seem to do that much. Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Axe Talisman. And then we have the Spike Crack tier and Faith tier as well. Let's jump into stats. Alright, and our stats for this build is 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 27 Endurance. We have 40 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 60 Strength when we two-hand this. 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We have 40 Arcane. We had over 51 Poise again, of course, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Strength as our buffs. I want to show off one more quick thing with this build is the whole concept of it. So the concept here pretty much is you have the throwing ability, of course, but you're going to get in Rot when you can. Try to get in hits, proc Rot, and then after you proc Rot, you're going to use the throwing ability to try to build up Bleed. You're going to see it work to better effect here as we're able to get a good amount of range out of the Smith's Grip Spear as well. And I think the last one ends up being a Bleed proc, and then there we go, around like 5,000 damage or so, proc Bleed, and that's the concept there. And thanks for watching this one. I appreciate everybody that tuned in to my top 8 new powerful builds on 1.15. Try these out if you want to have a fun time too. Be sure to sub if you're not subbed to my channel yet. Also, check out the description for ways to support the channel and a discount on NordVPN. And I want to mention real quick the people waiting on the theme builds. They're around the corner. I'm going to be doing them soon. Can't wait to jump back into those. And be sure to comment your thoughts on the video. I will catch you in the next one. Much love to this community. Can't wait for the next video.